There we go. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. It is RPG with DBJ. I, of course, am your host, DBJ. And glad to have the creatives, the community, and the kind folks out there join me live. And I have a co-host with me. My co-host is RP Gamer. Please, RP Gamer, introduce yourself. You have, for some reason, you don't have any sound, even though you are unmuted. I don't like it.
Is that better?
Yes, sir.
Am I back?
At least I.
Sorry about that. I have a separate mute on my headset, which accidentally got clicked. but yeah, I'm Brian, aka RP Gamer, and I run a channel like DBJ's, which hasn't been around for a little while, which is actually having a comeback next week. Next Monday will be my first video back. So look out for that and the changes that are coming to my channel. And I'm also 1/3 of Power Up Gamers with publishing, and we've just finished and successfully funded our latest Kickstarter for Legats Volume 2, which will be coming out at the end of the year. And so I'll do the rest of the selling myself at the end.
Don't worry about it. Don't sell yourself short. Power Up Gamers is was, at least initially, was specifically created to help people who have various disabilities and or difficulties in role to find resources in role playing, and then I think it just grew out from there. So yeah, it's really cool. And also, you are, because you're 1/3 of Power Up Gamers, you are also a writer there, sir, a creative. Yeah. So okay. The title of this was Organic versus Static Gaming. I put RPG preparation. I guess it's role. I should have renamed it like role playing assets, I suppose. Okay, so I did not name it like railroading versus like sandbox. I didn't do that, and I didn't name it like improv versus high prep. And there's a reason for this. Okay, so we are going to talk about organic versus static gameplay. And what I mean by that is we're going to talk about it on the player side and hopefully go over to the dungeon master side as well, game master side. So player side, what I'm thinking of in terms of organic versus static is on one extreme, we have some players who would prefer to say, hey, I'm going to start off at first level or whatever the beginning of this game is. And they plan out their, like, you know, in Dungeons and Dragons, they plan out 20 levels of what their character is going to be before the game has started. So, you know, I'm going to be a fighter first for 3 levels, and then I'm going to take 6 levels of sorcerer, and then, you know, 7 levels of monk, or whatever the case may be, right? They've already planned it out before the game has started, and without knowing what their interactions are going to be in the game, as opposed to a player that says, hey, I'm going to start out as a first level fighter, and whatever my experiences are in the game, I'm going to react to it. So if they see something that, I don't know, there's a big event by the gods or something, then they maybe become religious, and then that character decides, hey, I want to become, you know, become more devout and become a cleric or even a druid or something. Or their personality and their outlook starts to change in game. Same thing with dungeon masters. Some dungeon masters say, hey, I've got an adventure. The player characters are supposed to go after the bad guy. The players are, you know, it's not necessarily railroaded, but the adversary is already set in stone. The player characters know that they're supposed to kill it, and then things happen, and then ultimately at the end, as a dungeon master, you're like, listen, this is the bad guy. The player's going to kill the bad guy, and we're going to be done. As opposed to players that are in the adventure and maybe for whatever reason, they're convinced that the bad guy that you created maybe is wronged themselves. So I made an example of like the dragon that's ravaging the townsfolk, but maybe maybe you said like the dragon's eggs were destroyed by the townfolk, or it was cursed, or it's injured, or something. And then the player characters are like, wait a minute, the dragon's not really evil. He's just been wronged. We're going to help the dragon. And as a dungeon master, like, do you go along with it, or do you just like double down on, well, no, the dragon's evil. He's just evil. We're just going to have a big fight. Or do you go along with the maybe what you hadn't intended for the players to actually feel sympathy for your bad guy, something like that. So that's a long-winded version of what I'm talking about, organic or inorganic. So let's talk about being a player character, organic versus static growth for a character. And then we can come up with some examples, the good or bad on either side. And if you guys have ever encountered something like that. So let's begin. So for a player character, does it make sense both mechanically, and because we got to talk about mechanics too, right? To make sense mechanically versus mechanically to grow organically, or to have a static growth. So for example, the person plays a fighter. One person says, hey, I'm going to be a fighter, but I already know what levels I'm going to take, versus I'm going to play a fighter and then change in game. Because we know that mechanically there are some systems that if you don't pick certain things at certain times, it can disadvantage your character later on. Despite the fact that internally, narratively, it might make sense. So what do you think about that, RP?
Well, I personally don't like blocking off a character's progression simply because at the time they didn't think that they wanted to go that route. I hate skills that have prerequisites that you should have known about and should have took ages ago. And that, I think that comes from, I hate using the phrase, but a video game mentality, where the whole point is to kind of optimize your character to be able to take on the pre-programmed threats that are there. Whereas in a tabletop, it's not pre-programmed and it doesn't exist, kind of thing.
Yeah, I do agree with that in the sense that like it does bug me if a game system is like I'm just making an example, like a fighter isn't any good unless you're at least 5 levels of fighter, because if you don't take the 5th level option or something, somehow you're less, I don't know, how can you say, less fightery, less able to perform your function in the game. Or maybe it's things like, for example, like skill trees. Some games have skill trees or prerequisites, like you must take, I don't know, what's the Pathfinder one, like Great Cleave, I think, or something. It was some kind of feat where you had to take like 3 feats before it to obtain like a specific thing, and if you didn't take those things in a certain order or at a specific time, you would be disadvantaged somehow. Yeah, Vincent even says it's a weird relic of old games, I think, where things like skill trees exist. And he also says, or that somehow have to earn to gain a new option. Reminds me of old prestige classes from 3.5. And I do feel like there's a limitation on that, because for example, let's say the person playing the fighter is maybe gaming with a clerical character, and the cleric heals them and like summons fire from the skies and talks to the gods or something, and that player character wants to role play. Maybe they were in war and they're like, the gods are stupid and nobody trusts them and they're petty and I hate the gods. And then maybe this person's player starts to change his outlook, but it's like, well, I can't change my outlook yet because I haven't reached 5th level. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of That's kind of bizarre, right? But let me defend the other side a little bit here, right? There are times when we've seen stories where the main character doesn't change, but the people around them do change. For example, like I'm binge watching a Netflix series called Longmire, and Longmire is like an old school. It's a modern day Western essentially. It takes place in Wyoming, big sky country in the United States, and he's this old style sheriff in a world where people are modernized, and they go out of their way really to make him seem like a very old school individual. He does things the old way. He's very old fashioned, but everyone else around them is doing something different. And there can be something said for that. Like Samurai is a good example of a person playing an individual who has a very like ingrained, like, this is how I'm going to act. I'm not going to change. My outlook's not going to change to the outside world, despite the fact that maybe firearms are coming into Japan and you're playing a samurai, or there's these outside influences, and the player character's like, no, I'm going to stick on this road. My character hates the gods, and no matter what happens, like whatever, I prayed to the gods that my village wouldn't be killed, and they killed everybody. So my character's like hyper focused on this one thing, and no matter what happens around them, I'm going to stick to this one thing. So what do you think about that outlook?
I think there's definitely a place for it. There's definitely players who like to go that route, who like to say, well, I'm playing a fighter, I'm going to stay a fighter until level 20, so why can't I optimize a fight? I have no intention of changing, so I can optimize, I can prep for learning this skill. And I understand where it comes from, because it comes from like role play, like mechanics to role play experience, playing that way. So if you're more experienced as a fighter, you get more fighter abilities and thing. But so there is a place for that kind of player, that kind of character. It's just like meshing it with other types of players, other characters.
Yeah, I think even 5th edition, I think a number of people have found that multi-classing in 5th edition isn't very good, unless it's done in a specific order. Otherwise, you end up, they call it a gish. It's like a gestalt of different things, and there ultimately, mathematically, it turns out that it's actually better for you to either stick with one particular class all the way through and never change, or if you're going to multi-class, it only works if you multi-class in a particular order and particular level. So for example, like it's like you should only have 3 levels of fighter if you're going to be like a fighter wizard, as opposed to being like an arcane knight or something. You know what I mean? It's a very bizarre kind of math that they've created. But Vincent says something pretty specific that I like. Wow. The other example would be Ned Stark from Game of Thrones, which does not change and gets killed for it. The weird thing is that we root for him because he seems like the good guy, but that's not the world for it. And in many ways, there are great role-playing potentials for like doubling down on who your character is despite the world around them. It's we all know about the lawful stupid character that's the paladin, that's like, I'm good and I'm noble and I'm going to smite evil and I'm never going to change. But there are stories where if the world is gray, it's the person that steals bread, but they're really doing it for a good reason. Are they a criminal? Are they evil? Well, no, but they're committing a crime. And if you're lawful stupid paladin is like, you committed a crime, I'm going to punish you and cut your hand off. And it's just like, well, the person's not evil. What the hell are you doing? There are story potentials for that, right? Like a person could say, hey, I am going to cut their hand off. Like in Game of Thrones, Ned cuts off the show starts out with Ned cutting off the head of a guy who runs from the wall. And he took the devotion. You take the black, you go to the wall, you defend the wall, and he's running from the wall to try to tell people like, hey, there's this, problem like White Walkers and there's evil, and I need to tell everybody. And Ned's like, yeah, I get it. No, right, you did the right thing. I'm still cutting your head off. Like, you shouldn't have left the wall. And he's, it's like, wait a minute, you just heard the man tell you that he left the wall to specifically tell you and everyone else that there's this great danger. And it's like, yeah, I get it. Thanks. But you shouldn't have done that. You know what I mean? Like, it's a very bizarre kind of thing. And even, Ned's honesty in Game of Thrones is just like, dude, you're being used. Will you stop it? And everyone's telling him like, you need to get the hell out of here because they're going to eat you alive. And, he's like, yeah, I know, but I made a promise, so I'm not going to change. But I think it takes a player outlook to do that, because it's almost as if you're saying like, I'm going to keep making decisions, and even though those decisions are bad for my character, I'm still going to continue down this path despite whatever other things are going on. And then, of course, hello there, sir, Fat Ninja DM from Fantasy Grounds. College. Definition for adventure: an unusual and exciting, typically hazardous experience or activity. Unfortunately, the spark is lost about being in a role-playing game. In a role-playing game, the simple fact of escapism. So I could see like, how do you put this? Someone's expectation in the game might be like, hey, I want to. My character's a fighter. I'm going to be fighter, and I'm going to always be fighter because that's what I want to experience. And that's, I don't want to see these outside influences. And then there might be another player that's like, hey, I'm going to be fighter today, but who knows what the future is going to bring. I might become a thief or something because I have to give up my fighter ways and live on the streets or something of that nature, or what have you. So, but let's put that in opposition to being a dungeon master, because I think that's where the biggest thing comes in. As a dungeon master, sometimes we have in our head like, hey, this is the way the world should be, right? We're gonna have an evil horde of goblinoids on one side, and then like an evil lich on the other side, and some evil things going on, and the player characters are going to confront them. They're gonna have a big fight, and we're done. And the players somehow go, nah, let's team up with them. Or the players are like, no, we'd rather go to that distant island instead of fighting the evil horde. And then what do you do with that information?
Well, the thing is, we as DMs are storytellers, really. And even if we don't want to, we come up with the ending in our heads of the campaign we're writing. Even if we don't want to, we come up with an ideal end game for it, or an even just ideal end game to the session. And when that doesn't happen, that's when we get a bit. We start throwing our toys out the pram and get a bit. Well, I'm not letting you do what you want to do because you didn't let me have the ending I wanted. So. But I think it takes a good GM to just sit back and let things flow as they need to not let their vision cloud the fun, kind of thing.
Yeah, because I suppose like Fat Ninja DM says about losing the spark of escapism in the role-playing game. It could be that, right, like what I wanted out of my I made the adventure, and what I wanted out of it may not be what the players wanted out of it. Like maybe I just wanted them to kill the dragon, but what they wanted out of it on a metagaming level is like, hey, we want to change the world, and we want to be part of something bigger. So helping the dragon makes us like part of us changing the world, or be movers or shakers, or feel like we've got power because we're just lowly adventurers, and maybe teaming up with the dragon makes us feel more important. And it could, I don't want us to be like psychologists, but maybe the people playing in the game are like, you know what, my job is, they make me feel like a peon. Maybe in this game world, this is the way for me to escape, like feeling more important and serving a bigger cause or something. Even though, I'm the DM and I'm like, I didn't set up for that. I didn't want you to team up with the dragon. What do I do? And learning to roll with that sometimes can be very difficult when the players throw you a curveball, and just letting, going, well, okay, I guess, instead of just, shrugging your shoulders and going, okay, I guess they've got a dragon as a patron, I suppose. Let's see what we can do with that. Maybe there's a bigger bad that hates the dragon or something, or missions the dragon, puts the players on or something. Yeah, Vincent says, I think there's a difference between a sandbox and a campaign. He says, in a campaign, you are somewhat expected to follow the story the GM made. In a sandbox, you can truly do what you want. If the players just ignore the campaign, even though they said they wanted a campaign, I would be pissed. In a sandbox, I would be pissed if they waited for the adventure to come to them. You know what? Here we go with our the ultimate word, like session 0. Player expectations. Talk to your game master. Like, it is kind of like, I would be pissed if I set up this long, like the players are like, hey, I want to go in a campaign, I don't know, to kill the dragon, and I set up this long story arc for them to follow this path to kill the dragon, and then they're just like, nah, we don't really feel like going to the mountain to kill the dragon. Hey, there's this little island on the map in the corner. Let's go to that. Just like, wait a minute. I prepped for hours for this thing. I even, set up encounters for each level. I would be pissed. I would roll with it, but I think I'd be pissed. I'd almost do a quantum ogre and have the dragon hunt them down on that little tiny island. Just blast them into nothing just for no reason. Just like, what the hell?
I think that it comes down to a level of mutual respect between the players and the DM. The DM needs to understand that the players will make choices that they didn't think of, but the players also need to understand that the DM's probably spent a while prepping what they've prepped, so it might be best to go somewhat along with what they've prepped, not go completely off.
Yeah, I gotta agree. I mean, if you're a player and you asked for something and you agreed to be in it, like it's really disrespectful to like go off the rails for no other reason than just a simple whim. Like, I'll make an example. There's an old adventure called the Isle of Dread. I think it was D1, whatever. Anyway, it was came out with the basics red box or purple box set, and I think even the expert set or something. But anyway, it's really old. Anyway, Isle of Dread, big island. It was one of the first sandbox adventures. It was literally an island. It had a couple of it was a hex crawl kind of adventure. A bunch of random tables. It had about 5 or 6 notable locations on the island, and the whole idea was you go to the island and experience stuff. It was basically you go to the island, you experience stuff. If I would be pissed if I'm the game master and I said, hey guys, you wanted me to buy a module. I bought this module called the Isle of Dread. And everyone is like, no, we don't really feel like going to the island. Or somebody says, well, my character would never get on a boat. It's you always get that one guy is like, my character doesn't like water. I'm not getting on the boat. And it's like, wait, what?
You've got to go along with the DM to an extent. You've got to give in you wanted the adventure, so if you didn't want to go on the adventure, why turn up to the game?
Exactly. Dead man, the storyteller, says Cal falls from the sky, kills the player. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, I get, as players, like, we want to be like in control of our character and we don't want to be go down the railroad, but really, if the adventure's through the door, you got to go through the door, right? It's how you react to the adventure is different. You can decide to be like, once you go through the door, it's like you can be scared, you can run, you can attack, you can, have some forethought about it, you can be guilty, you can have all, but you should really grab onto the hook. If the game master gives you a hook, grab the hook, follow the adventure. If it's a little boy with a note running down the street and he tries to pickpocket you, and the little boy is the quote unquote quest giver, like, hey, follow the kid, and the kid takes you on an adventure, follow the damn kid. Like, don't go, my character doesn't care about the kid, I don't care that he's got a treasure map in his hand. It's like, okay, really, like, which other DM are you DMing with instead of the DM in front of you that's going to have this other adventure that's has nothing to do with the one that the person prepped for you in the first place, right? I mean, I do find that a little bit ironic. Vincent says, if the players just ignore the campaign, even though they said they want to campaign, sorry. Zynok says, the player, what sorcery is this? The true wrath of the dice gods made manifest. About getting hit in the head with a cow. Although, I suppose if you have a world where cows fall from the sky, and you explained this earlier, whatever. But I also think, though, as a dungeon master, right? Like, if you over prep, if you make the parameters a little too narrow, I think you'll always have people pressing against the sides of the rails, trying to go off the rails, right? So if you have I'm going to just make an example. Let's go back to the evil dragon terrorizing the village. I mean, if the players completely ignore it, like, oh, there's a dragon terrorizing a village, we're going the opposite direction. It's like really, like, you're an adventurer. Like, the whole point is that you're supposed to go into danger. If you're going to make up a character who's like completely afraid of getting hurt, that's kind of ridiculous. But on the other hand, I could see players maybe going about killing the dragon or confronting the dragon differently. Like, maybe they're like, well, let's, instead of, hey, let's just get an army and try to kill the dragon, they might say to themselves, well, there's two sides to every story. Let's find out what the dragon really wants. You know what I mean? Like, they might make that decision as opposed to, let's pull out our spells and swords and go kill it. In which case, they're still engaging in the adventure. They're just not doing it. They're not doing it in the manner in which you may be expected. Instead of saying, go kill the dragon and get the horde.
That's where it falls on the GM to then adapt and grow the adventure in that direction, instead of just saying no. Instead of blocking them off at every turn. I mean, a GM could, when they go approach the dragon, could have the dragon just straight up attack them and start the fight that they wanted that way. But a good GM would let it play out and see where it went, and maybe the dragon's not in the mood to talk and will attack anyway, but let the players explore that option.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like, even if the players want to go about it in a different way, like talking to the dragon, I still would, even if in my mind I'm like, oh, the dragon's just murderous, just wants to kill them, I think I would flex a little bit on it and have the dragon speak to them, even if the dragon was pissed off, so that it doesn't just completely discount the players' actions, right? Like, I would still, if the players are going to interact and want to really interact in the story, I don't think I would just say, you know what, you tried to talk to it and it's completely useless right off the bat. I think I'd give it a little bit, or at least even if they can't talk to the dragon, maybe there's a faction of people they encounter where they find out that, hey, we tried to talk to the dragon and the dragon is murderous and you really don't want to do that. Maybe they can find that information. But Vincent probably is starting. He's probably starting the first couple of rules. Maybe we could have like a one of those ancient scrolls that you put on the wall of the rules of gaming, because he says, I think that's part of being a player. There are two basic rules you as a player have to justify. One, I have to go on the adventure, and two, I will do so with the other PCs. Man, how many new players do not understand those rules?
No, I mean, you've got the stereotypical rogue that sits in the corner of the bar and says, "I'm not going anywhere." And then and as a GM, you're just like, well, what you here for? What? I'm not running an adventure in the bar.
Yeah,
the whole dwarven army's not going to come to this bar off the off chance that you're sat there.
I think that's funny because I think in some players' heads, like some of their greatest like iconic heroes or in stories kind of have that mentality, like, hey, I'm not going along. It's the Han Solo. I just want my money and I'm leaving. Or it's the Wolverine character who's like, folds his arms and is like, get away from me, kid. I'm not, or Batman or something, like, I'm doing my own thing. But I think sometimes they fail to realize that in every single one of those situations, those loner, I'm not going along with everyone else situations, those characters actually change their minds or come up with, there's a story related reason that they do become involved in the story. Wolverine's a classic loner, except in most stories, Wolverine's never alone. He either like adopts a kid or does one of those like so-called "I told you so" moments. Like, I'm not following along with you guys, but well, somebody needs to be here to protect you. Like they always make a reason or go along with the reason to be in the story, even though they are quote unquote playing the loner. And you can absolutely be the loner character, and as long as you rationalize why you're going along, like, those adventurers are going off on their to find fame and fortune. I shouldn't get involved, but maybe I'll find some information about the person that destroyed my village or something. Like you're going to have to, as a player, you just need to say first, I go on the adventure, I'm playing with other people, and then design a reason why your player who normally wouldn't go. I'm a farmer, why should I go? Or my character's a noble, why should I get dirty? Like, you need to come up with a reason why you're going along on this quest. Hey, I'm a book person. I don't know why I'm going on a quest. I'm normally reading in the library and trying to learn wizardry. Why should I go on a quest? And it could make up a reason. Hey, my mentor told me I had to go, and even though my quote unquote my character doesn't want to be here, I'm going along with the story, right? There's this dumb TV show, the A-Team, and in the A-Team, Mr. T, pity the fool, hated flying. Every single adventure, I'm not getting in the plane, blah blah blah, and they'd always come up with some dumb way to like put tranquilizers in his food or put him in a chokehold or trick him some kind of way or whatever. And of course he'd be knocked out or whatever the case may be, bag over his head or something. And he gets in a helicopter or the plane, flies through the air, gets to where he goes, and it's done. Every single time, the entire time he's like, I'm not getting on a plane. My feet belong on the ground. I pity the fool. And what happens? Even you as a player could even go along with it. Like, I'm not getting on a boat. I'm a dwarf. We don't swim. And then, quote unquote, pretend to go along where someone else convinces you or tricks you or charms you or has a night of debauchery and you get drunk and then they take your drunken body onto the ship or whatever. And you just let it happen. Like, come up with a reason why. Maybe there's a gold coin sitting in the middle of the deck of the ship and you're just like, oh, gold. and you scramble your way up the gangplank to pick up the gold coin, and then off we go. And you're like, what the, just be an adventurer.
A lot of people who come up with this like loner character because they think it's cool and awesome, and all their favorite characters are loner types. They forget that most of these characters aren't loner types by choice. They've become loner types through circumstance. Like Wolverine's become a loner type because anyone he gets close to gets killed, so he stays alone. So they forget that these loner types really do like being part of a team. They just don't show it.
Yeah. Deadman, the storyteller, even says, in my first campaign, the players said basically not interested when the adventure was presented to them. So I said, okay, then the game ends there. I mean, you know what? I mean, I've done that before where it's just like, oh, you don't want to do this? Fine. 5 minutes into it, okay, game's over. Who wants to run a game? And, if the players look around dumbfounded, like, wait a minute, what? I mean, I couldn't imagine like setting up like this really elaborate like thing in Roll20 or Fantasy Grounds or something, and you've got your virtual tabletop, and you're like, hey, we're going to have the dragon in the cave. The characters are right in front of the cave. I've set up all the assets. I've got all my traps and encounters, and this is going to be a multi-level adventure. And the players show up, and they're like, nah, we're not going in the cave. And you're like, wait a minute, you just asked me to make an adventure of you going into the cave. You're not going in the cave? Fine. Okay, well, I guess there's no adventure then. We're done. Thanks, guys.
I actually had something similar where I ran an adventure, and the majority of the party were going down, and then the rogue type decided, there's nothing there for me. I'm going to go this way and have my own adventure. So I was like, right, fine, you go off that way and have your adventure. I haven't written anything, but you can go have your adventure, and I'll carry on with the rest of the players with what I've prepared.
Yeah, I mean,
off you go.
Yep. Vince even says, yeah, they're and that's the job of the PC, like capital J, like that's the job of the PC, not the GM or the other people at the table. You have to find a reason to be in the group and this adventure yourself, and that is your job. Like really, I mean, we've all seen, I feel like we've all seen enough TV, enough television, enough movies, read enough comic books, read enough graphic novels, seen enough media where even though we know the we know the characters are at odds either with each other or the story. The classic buddy cop television show or movie where one cop is like, I'm by the book and we're going to do this thing, and the other cop is like, I'm the maverick cop and I break the rules and stuff. There's always a reason why one or the other goes together with the other one. The maverick cop is like, I'm going to interrogate the bad guy, and the good cop is like, you're breaking the rules. I better follow you to prevent you from doing this, right? They're not literally like folding their arms and not going on the adventure. They're like, yeah, we're going to confront the bad guy. And the one character rationalizes like, hey, I'm going to make sure the maverick cop doesn't do anything wrong, right? Instead of just splitting the party and going, I'm going back to my boss sitting at my table. I'm not being a detective today. It's like, wait, what? That's the adventure. You know what I mean? Although Vincent makes a comment about BA. He's like, who wants to knock out my character? Tesla Ranger says, I have to wonder whether BA didn't like flying or he didn't like flying when Murdoch was the pilot. I want a trash bag. Anyway, that's a comment for like a specific episode. Anyway, so, but I do agree with you. Like, even, okay, let's appeal to the mechanical part of the people who are players who want to go off on their own. And let's just make this purely mathematical, right? If you've got 4 players and all 4 players are together and they're going on an adventure with the DM, that means they have 100% engagement in the adventure with the DM and all those people. If you split the party and say, hey, I'm going to do this other thing, that means 3 people get 75% of the attention and you only get 25% off on the side because the DM's got to split his attention. And that means you get your little 25%, the other three get their 75%. Now, if you want to be rude, you could try to dominate more of that time and try to carve off a 28% maybe. I'm going to try to take 35%, in which case you're stealing from the other people, the other three who are together, who collectively make up 75% of the gaming time, right? So you're specifically, whenever you split the party, you want to do your own thing. When you're like, hey, these guys have this, want to go on, they have a plan to go attack the dragon, and my plan is to go on the other side of the mountain range and get away from the dragon at all because we're going to get killed by it, and you want to leave, you're literally reducing the percentage amount of time you get to play in the game, unless you want to be a spotlight hog or a thief or seen as an a-hole. It's like, rationalize why the party goes together. Even if you really think in heart of hearts, like, we're second level characters, we should not be fighting a dragon, at least go along with the party and express it in the game. I always say, like, when in doubt, role play it out. Like, have your character express it. Like, guys, this isn't really a good idea. Like, dragons are not a thing we need to attack or talk to or something like that. We should come up with another plan. Now, of course, you might feel a little disappointed. Like, man, they plan on attacking this thing, and I know we're going to get killed. But my feeling is, if you're with other people and you don't have that synergy, then that's a bigger issue rather than folding your arms and saying, I'm not going to engage in the adventure. I think something that just came to mind as far as being organic with growth and things would be the classic random encounters. The use of random encounters is a today isn't as prevalent as it used to be when it started in the 70s and 80s, where you had a bunch of random tables and such. But random encounters, I think, gets a really bad rap because people are like, oh, rolling their eyes, like, I'm not going to roll on a random table because it's just some crap that's in the way of my real adventure. But I think random encounters can be good if the random encounters themselves are shaped around the adventure, the world you're trying to create. So specifically, like, if you're in a vast desert, if your random encounters are random encounters that are shaped in your desert, like, I don't know, orcs riding giant scorpions and sand snakes, and maybe there's like dust devils that come up, or like quicksand, or I don't know, you've reskinned earth elementals, or like a ooze, instead it's like a sand creature or something, and you make a list of like 10 random encounters. I think you can still organically make those random encounters fit into your world. So you roll on the players don't go directly to the castle in the desert. They decide to go in this like roundabout manner. You're like, okay, let's roll some random encounters, instead of just automatically thinking, like, rolling your eyes like, oh, this is just a resource drain. Make those random encounters fit into your world. Roll the random encounter and go, oh, they find 3 giant scorpion riders, and then shape the story around it. Maybe they're on patrol to this castle you have set up. Maybe they are trying, they're scouts, and they're for a bigger, larger army that wants to find the castle. Maybe they're searching for escaped slaves from the castle, and they just happen to come upon you or something. Maybe these are people that live in the area, and they don't want people to go to the ancient castle that's never been disturbed. Anything like that. Maybe you change the story and have them hunt one of the player characters. Like, they specifically have details about one or more of the player characters. Like, hey, we're coming after you. We want to bring you back to our leader because we know you're going after the ancient castle, or something like that. What do you think about like random encounters?
In terms of tabletop, I like them because you can set, even though they are random encounters, you can set them up and say you see running up to you from the distance 3 wolves running towards you and that. But I think recently they've got a bad rap because whenever someone mentions random encounters, they equate it to video game random encounters where it's like you take a step and you suddenly get attacked, and then you take another step, get attacked again. So I think recently they've got a bad rap for that, but I think they do hold a place. They do.
Yeah. Vincent Shine says in the chat, he says, if random encounters are just, quote, let's do this fight before we go on the real adventure, then they are bad. But if you involve them into the story or give the PC some interesting challenge, it can be really good and give different PCs the chance to shine or gain new information or items. They shouldn't just be something to stretch out game time. And I think that's absolutely important, right? Like, a random encounter isn't just there to quote unquote drain the PCs, which, now, mind you, let me define this. Maybe the point of the setting might be to drain the PCs. So the point could be that this world, wherever it is, the vast swamp, the evil desert, the dangerous mountain range or the valley, it could be that it is so dangerous that traveling from one place to another will drain your resources. So although it's given a bad name as like a resource drain or a time fix, that could be part of it. But also, like Vince says, giving players the opportunity to shine is sometimes very important, right? Your clerics or your rogues or whatever, that ranger that didn't get a chance to track something, the paladin that didn't get to smite something evil. This might be an opportunity for those players to come up with new things to do. Like, let's say the rogue didn't get to do roguey things, and it's like, hey, I'm going to help hide my party so that the random encounter sneaks past us. I mean, we get to sneak past the random encounter. We hide. We're going to hide in the trees and the foliage. We're going to hide ourselves under the sand and let the giant sand scorpions go over top of us or something. Like, maybe that player has a great idea. They get to shine. They get to step forward. So a random encounter is a great way to spotlight some of the characters. Maybe one of the characters is a cleric and they confront another religious order, but come to find out that their religious orders are similar, which brings up the thing that Vincent says about giving information. Sometimes a random encounter doesn't necessarily even need to be a fight. It could be a matter of gaining information about something. Maybe they find a tribe of nomads in the desert, and the nomads warn them about the evil castle and says, hey, on the full moon, something comes out of the castle. A door opens up, or a shimmering field around the castle seems to disappear on a full moon. So maybe you might not want to go there that quickly. So it could be information. And he says it shouldn't just be something to stretch out game time, which I agree. It could be, although as a dungeon master, maybe you might not have anything ready quite yet. And you're like, oh, I don't know. Let me roll a random encounter and go with that. That might be a mistake, but I think shaping all encounters, whereas although the dice say they're random, in the world, they're not. When I say they're not random, in the world, there could be happenstance where two or more individuals or creatures or something come across each other, but it's not random in the world. Those things live in the world, and I think shaping every encounter to be within the world makes sense, especially if you make it personal or let people shine. Vincent says, yeah, the draining the PCs part is something I personally hate. 5e and Cypher system just assumes that the players will have multiple encounters each day, or they can just recover fully. And actually, what a lot of people fail to realize, 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons mathematically works out to something, it's like 5 to 8 encounters before short and long rests. It's literally, you're supposed to have like 5 encounters before you recover. And oftentimes, just, I guess this goes back to the video game thing, it's like fight, and then there's a place for me to recover, right? I get to get my open up my healing potions. I get to go through my inventory, and there's little rest spots, and then you get to fight, and for the most part, most people now are conditioned in RPGs to be to not be drained before they encounter the next encounter. But actually, the math actually is supposed to work out that you're supposed to have multiple encounters before any short rest, which it's kind of bizarre, because then it's almost like you're going to war. Because if you have 3 to 5 encounters before a short rest, it's like, damn, like that's a lot of fighting in an hour, right? But that's how the math works out, and unfortunately, that's not how the gameplay is done. Which is why for the most part, one creature against a party of 4 ends up getting trounced because the players aren't drained of their resources in many ways.
I tend to use random encounters as setups for future adventures, or what I call, because that's what they're called in games, side quests. Like they'll encounter a merchant or something that's wanting to go somewhere, or that's a bit dangerous for them to go, so they ask the players for help, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Even Vince says, so if you don't do that, they're never properly challenged. Having them travel a long time becomes super tedious or boring. Yeah, if they don't see things or encounter things or have any hazards in their way to get to, I don't know, the desert and the evil castle or the jungles or the forest or mountain pass or something, then it just it's more like, hey, you're traveling 3 weeks and blah blah blah, nothing happens. It kind of defeats the purpose of talking about the dangerous trek to get to the shadowy mountain if there's no dangers to get to the shadowy mountain, right? But also, as I said before, not every encounter is a fight. Like you mentioned, RP, that there's setups for other adventures. It could be setups for maybe even giving them insight into something. It could be leaving little clues for, hey, they're going to the shadowy mountain, but maybe later on, this particular encounter actually gave them a clue for the second part of the adventure. And okay, I got to plug it a little bit. I know I do it all the time, but I got to do it. There's even the fact that they might encounter hazards that have nothing to do with a fight. So they've got to go across a raging river and a big ravine, or there's like, torrential rains and flood storms or something like the environment itself might be a hazard unto itself. And then that way, you as a DM or dungeon master, game master, whatever, you can challenge their other resources and challenge their ability to think outside the box, right? So, for example, maybe the players have to figure out how to get across the valley normally was dry, but now it's flooded. So they have to figure out how to get from one side to the other. So they have to work together maybe to stretch rope across, or the paladin in his armor, he's got to take the armor off because he's going to be soaking wet. They've got to figure out how to get their mounts across. Like, you can have other challenges to their skills, skill sets, and their ability to be creative to get out of situations as part and parcel of travel and stuff. Jared says, I'd have to disagree. I run my random encounters like a gauntlet. D&D originally was a survival horror game with lots of resource management and cooperation as you smash doors down in dungeons. Modern day adventures can be quite flaccid and loose, and players don't like the oppressive and tactical play that the original mechanics created. A game where survival was not guaranteed and adventuring was a high risk, high reward career of intense drama and grand rolls of the dice. I'm gonna let me write this down. Hold on. No, but seriously though, Jared does bring up a valid point that really, like, when people talk about OSR, it was a gauntlet. Like, it was literally, like, when they say save or die, like, it literally was very much a save or die thing. Even if you didn't, quote unquote, have to save or die, it was very much this next encounter, no matter what it is, there's a good chance I might die. And we've got like 6 more encounters before we get there. Hell, there was even if you went into a cave system like what was the Expedition Barrier Peaks or Keep on the Borderlands or any of these old adventures, like they had random encounters just from you walking through the hallways, right? Because there would be orcs on patrol, bugbears, you know, taking a piss in the corner, right? It was just a whole bunch of like random gelatinous cubes rolling around the hallways. And of course, some of the things was a little gonzo, but the point was that you never knew when you turn the corner what you might see. And that might be your last. And today we tend to think of story over challenge, right? Like the story is we're going to defeat the dragon, not the challenge is to get to the dragon, and there's 20 things in the way to get there. And who knows if we skip past 3 of those things that were our challenge the dragon, those 3 things we just passed might follow us on our way to the dragon. And if we don't deal with it, that's going to add to the danger. You know, like we don't really think about it that way. Now, in some ways, video games will do this. Like they will ramp up the dangers. But in the bad way, a lot of times video games ramp the danger based on the level of play as opposed to, hey, I'm first level and I'm going to go directly to the dragon. You know, in a sandbox, it's like, well, that's your fault. You decided to be a first level character to try to take on the dragon. Let's see. Zynox says, I tend to run fairly light on combat in terms of frequency. If you put combat in front of the PCs every 5 minutes, they will expect to be able to beat them. I prefer fewer combat encounters, which are more individually dangerous, where running away is a perfectly valid solution. And it should be. I agree with that. Vince says, currently many RPGs are competence porn because you just have to use the right abilities that your character already has. Back then, it was an actual challenge to gain the competence yourself. I have to actually agree with that in terms of like the OSR mentality was very much not your player character gaining abilities, but like as a player learning how to get out of situations as a player to think things. That's why if you ever play with an old Grognard, their character, and they make a first level character, they're going to come in there with a dungeon with a 10-foot pole, a chicken, a bag of flour, some marbles. They're going to have a candle with them. Like they're going to have all these things. And you're like, why the hell are they taking this stuff? And they're going to go, hey, invisible creature, I'm going to throw flour in the ground or throw it in the air. Marbles, I'm going to see if the floor is tilted to the side or something like that. Chicken, hey, I'm going to throw the chicken in the room to see if it activates the trap. Like that was the gaming mentality. It had nothing to do with I've got a +3 skill. It was more player learned attributes,
more trial and error.
Yep, and you learned how creatures were affected. Like it was like you learned to throw the chicken at the ooze and see what happened. You learned to throw the marbles at the wall and see if it reacted or fell to the side or something. You learned to blow flour into the cracks to see if air would come through and find a secret door. Like that was a thing. Jared says the story came out of the mechanics. It was the mud, blood, and tears that grew the flowers of narrative. I don't think some dungeon masters struggle with this distinction. I do think some dungeon masters struggle with this distinction and try to make things meaningful from a top-down perspective as opposed to a bottom-up player perspective. I think that's in itself, that's a good topic in general to bring that up, like top down, bottom up, right? Like, do we create a story? I want to make this dramatic story where the adventurers go on this quest and fight the dragon and such, or do you do it from bottom up where it's like let's say a player crits a roll or makes a big fumble, and then shaping the story around what happens to the players without worrying about what the end result of the story should be. I'm writing that down in a hopper. Thanks, JP.
I like kind of a mix of both of those. I like having a generalized end goal like having the antagonist there, but like not having it planned out in my head as best I can, like letting them get to the antagonist however they want. If they want to go straight for him, then good luck to them.
Yeah. Vince says there used to be groups who flooded dungeons before going in. Yeah, I've heard about flooding the dungeon. Hell, I've had the set the dungeon on fire before going in experience. Just like we're cutting down trees and getting kindling and stuff and oil. I was like, what the hell are they talking about? And they're like, yeah, we're just gonna set the dungeon on fire and smoke all the creatures out or something. It was something weird like that. But yeah, there was some gonzo stuff like that. Jared even says, this is very much the case where some groups are too slow at playing the game. A single encounter for them takes 2 hours to kill 3 goblins because they ponder every little action. Yeah, I can't say that just because Dungeons and Dragons started out as a version of like miniatures combat and that it should be that way. I mean, you really can't tell people how to use the tools that they own, even if you think the tool is inappropriate, right? Like if I own a wrench and I use it as a hammer, sure, if you're a carpenter, you're cringing because you're like, just get a hammer to hit the nail in. And I'm just like, nah, I like my wrench. It's perfectly fine. For each their own. But I will say that like, if that's the gaming style they want, then the mechanical portion of the game may not be conducive to the gaming style that they want, right? Like it might be one of those things where it's like, hey, maybe we should just pick a different role-playing game because this isn't like we're not getting the result we want because of the gaming style we desire, which is also a possibility too, or working together and saying, hey, this is if we do these 3 things, we can shape the gaming style we want into the game we want. Because there's people who've hacked everything, right? There's always ways to hack something. Whether it's the Dungeon Master's Guide is nothing but a giant giant hack of how to add like honor systems and spell point systems and more lethal systems into 5th edition if that's the only game you're playing. So yeah, there's other ways to play it as well. Yeah, Vincent says that smoke stuff we already did in the Rose of West Haven campaign. Yeah. Jared P says I guess one of the problems of D&D is that almost everything about it is framed around the romantic idea of noble questing adventurers who solve everything with violence. You know what? There's majority of role-playing games that pretty much solve everything with violence, right? There are some role-playing games that do not involve violence. Some side games, like there are like, I don't know what you call like more introspective social encounter style games, or like investigative games like Gumshoe. I'm trying to think of another one. Legend of Five Rings has a system for doing social interactions and whatnot. But yeah, that's going to be an issue with every role-playing game, right? They're going to have a big giant combat section because most people buy role-playing games because they want the high action. If people want more of the social interaction, you kind of have to do like a deep dive into like which games have the best way to do social interactions. I don't know, or some games just parody everything, right? They make a Cipher System. There's a parody of and social interaction. Really about combat. No, most of those Cthulhu games are about how long do I get to survive before I go mad or get killed, right? They have combat rules. Most of them are useless against whatever you're going against, unless there's other NPCs. But for the most part, it's a game of it's a game of Jenga, right? Who's the person that's going to make the tower fall down and die? Which is actually a game. I think it's Dread.
Yeah, Dread uses a Jenga tower.
Yep.
I think since we're talking about it, how about looking at how to make combat more organic rather than static?
Oh,
because plenty of times I've seen players where they're part of a party, but they all seem to be on their own during combat. They all seem to be like, I do this attack, I attack this monster, I attack this, and they don't seem to be kind of working together like you imagine a party would.
I've seen that happen quite a bit, where there's no synergy, or you even get some of the dumb things where, hey, I'm the mage, I'm going to cast fireball, even though I know the fireball is going to hit everybody, or and in many ways, like, the archetype is almost set like, hey, I'm the rogue, I'm going to sneak and backstab someone. I'm the fighter, I'm going to stay up front. I'm the cleric, I'm going to stay in the back and wait for somebody to be hurt. And that's cool, but it can be playing into those stereotypes too much. Can get a little bit, to me, get a little bit boring, unless everyone wants to play it more like a set of special forces units, and they work together. Like, you go in the door, B, you go to the side, you go to the left. I'm going to cast the fireball. It's this range. You stay out of range. You shoot your arrows. Like, I can see that.
But even that involves teamwork. Like everyone agreeing to do their own thing. Even that's a form of teamwork. But like, they don't seem to register that anyone else is there fighting. It's kind of them versus the monster, and once that monster's dead, they'll just move on to the next one.
Yeah, I have to give a shout out to Jared, Premont, and Vincent say talk about games like Noblesse and Monster Hearts, or other very social and role play focused games. Combat is very abstract and loose. Or the very best non-combat game, Everyone is John. That's a bizarre. That is this is best one-page game ever. And just as a side note, you can Google one page. It's either called One Page RPG or 200-word RPG contest. And I believe every year there is a contest to come up with, like, basically a one-page RPG. And a ton of submissions are made, and many of them have grown out. One, I believe, is called not Shred. It's Terrible RPG. And the Terrible RPG is like, you take a piece of paper and you write down all of your character's abilities that you want on the piece of paper, and every time you do something, you have to rip the paper and rip off at least one letter of what your character can do. And so as you go through the game, you're literally tearing a piece of your character off. It's really bizarre. But I have to give a shout out to people who think outside the box, especially if you're looking for a very specific type of role-playing desire. Everybody is John, for those who don't know, is a role-playing game in which everyone plays a part of the personality of an individual named John. And John has to go about his day doing simple things and some elaborate things, and then some really out-of-the-box things. And the idea is that you win if you get John to do the things you want John to do, and you have to somehow work and or prevent other players from achieving what they want John to do. So you can start out very simply with, like, get a cup of coffee, make a phone call, go to the movies, go buy groceries, and go all the way to bizarre, like, I'm going to go skydiving, I'm going to run naked through the streets, I'm going to eat a bowl of nails, or things like that. And it's a very fun party game, almost, I would say. And it's very gonzo as well, but I don't know why I keep saying gonzo. But anyway, so organic versus static play. Yeah, we can really, first from players and from game masters, I think we can learn a lot to become far more flexible. Like you said, RP, about working together. Part of that has to be kind of organic, right? Like, if one player is the rogue in the group, to have the other player who's maybe more frontline. It's like, hey, I'm going to set up a situation where I'm going to draw the enemies towards me so that you can do your thing and work together to allow other people to have their own spotlight as well.
I mean, to do that, there does come into play a bit of metagaming where the players talk amongst themselves about what they're going to do rather than in character. But I suppose you can let that off, really, because if it enhances the game, and also during combat, as the GM, as you're announcing each person's turn, remind them of what the player before them did, so that they can maybe incorporate that into their move. Say as the barbarian runs at the monster, I slowly sneak into the shadows and come up behind the monster.
Yeah, I'm very much into incorporating that in game, even mechanically, like especially when players are acting and reacting to what other things that are happening, especially what other players do. And also, just as a side note, I think this is a really great way for you as a player to give energy to other players at the table by acting and reacting to what other people do. So if your fighter is amazed at, acts amazed at the wizard casts a spell, and, the lightning bolt blasts the ogre in the chest or something, and you as a player, or as a character, make a comment about that, like, your magic powers are great or something, or where did you learn these things, or, you've harnessed the power of Thor, or whatever the case may be. By actually acknowledging what other people are doing, and incorporating that into their actions, I think really helps bring that energy into the game.
And it comes to GM as well. Allow your players that time to react to what their teammates just done. Say you start the round and the fighter thinks, yeah, this is what I'm going to do when it's my initiative, and then the player before them does something else, and then they all of a sudden think, actually, I'm gonna play off what they've done. Give the player the time to rethink what they want to do, rather than just say, right, you're doing what you're doing, and that's it. I mean, that reminds me of one of my first times as a player. It was at AD&D, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and the GM told us before we'd even rolled initiative, I want you to say what you're going to be doing this turn. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't know when I'm going to be going. What if I want to react to what they've done? Or then you'll have to come later in the initiative order if you want to react to something a player's done. And I'm like, well, and that was just, and I found that quite counterproductive. It wasn't any teamwork going on. People were just moving from monster to monster. Someone like fell over and needed healing. You have to wait until the next round started to react to that.
Yeah, I think that, like, what you're talking about is like, for me, if the players are invested in the game, then I think they should be, as a game master, I would reward their investment in the game. If everyone's just sitting back and, playing on their phone or something, or doodling, and they're just waiting for, I attack with my sword and then go back to whatever they're doing, it's like, you're not only are you not giving the energy, but then there's no reason for me to reward you for engaging in the game. So not only on the mechanical side, rolling the dice, should there be a reward, but I also think, like, if the players are giving the dungeon master energy, the dungeon master should then give that reward. And then sometimes that reward is the I don't know, stabbing the creature in the butt with a spear, and then the creature, turns around to find out who stabbed it, and then that exposes, the creature's flank is now open because he turns around, and giving that benefit to what they were doing. Vincent says that's how a werewolf game did the initiative. You go about initiative in reverse, so the person with the highest initiative could react to what the others did, which is super interesting, but a bit unintuitive. See, I role played that way for years, where it wasn't that you did everything backwards. It's more like we would do reverse declarative initiative. And we did that with DC Heroes and Marvel superheroes old games, where you would roll initiative. The bottom initiative would say what they were going to do very, very quickly, very generally. Like, I'm going to dodge. I'm going to attack. I'm going to hide. I'm going to tackle the bad guy. I'm going to unlock the cage. And then, as everyone declared what they were going to do, the very top initiative, the fastest person, then could react to everything happening below. And then, as each thing happened below, you either continued with your action. I'm going to open the door. Or you could say, "Oh well, man, the evil person's going is faster than me. They're going to try to block the door. So now I'm going to have to change my action." And some games they actually give you a penalty for changing your action. And that's the classic, like the evil virus is rolling across the floor, and then the good guy and bad guy go to dive for it, and then one of them is quicker, because they see one person diving for the gun or the virus or whatever, and then the quicker person sees it and then goes to lunge for it themselves and gets there beforehand. That's where that comes from. It's just a muscle that has to be flexed. It's more or less like, hey, declare what you're going to do, 10%, and then when you actually do it, that's the other 90%. Yeah, and Dead Man, the storyteller, says they could jump in an earlier initiative if they wanted. And there's always, in various games, they have initiative orders where you can hold your action, trigger a triggered reaction, you have a reaction, and those kind of things. Although for the most part, I think if you play it organically, a lot of that stuff happens naturally. Like, hey, I'm going to stand at the door with my sword, and the minute one of the bad people reaches their hand in or something, I'm going to hack at it. Like, that's pretty simple. That makes perfect sense. The minute, the bugbears reach their hand in the door, you go to hack at their hand. I wouldn't, go, oh, let's open the book and see what initiative order you're on, you stupid mother. It's like, no, go hack at their hand, whatever. Make some die rolls.
I think the main thing that affects, like, whether you play it organically or quite statically is the gaming group as a whole. Like, I mean, nowadays with YouTube, we all watch like groups like Absolute Tabletop and that in the Provokers campaign, and we see like this what appears to be a perfect gaming group that play off each other, have complete synergy with each other, and we all want that in our gaming groups. Like, we expect to find a gaming group and it to be just like that. And I think that's where the problems start, with like players not paying attention or the GM getting too annoyed because it's not happening the way they want it. But people forget that, like, gaming groups, you have to grow and evolve together. You have to learn each other's ways and what works best in that situation.
I have to agree with you on that. Just learning, just being very, having a good synergy with other people. Sometimes even if you know that the game master, dungeon master has to have time to think, that you as a player pick up the slack and maybe start role playing with the other people at the table, because internally, hey, the dungeon master, man, he's trying to come up with this idea. I'm not going to quote unquote call it out, or whatever. Hey, I'm going to interact with the people at the table, give the dungeon master some time to think about what they're going to do. That gives me a good time to role play with the other characters. Hey, this other player hasn't said much. I'm going to ask them a specific open-ended question so that they come into the group. Like, those are things where just giving that energy, which to me, yet again, JP came up with an idea. That's probably another thing in the hopper. Like, how do you create energy and synergy, that undefined quality that you may see on YouTube with groups that really work together very well? Like, how do you create that? And in many ways, it's kind of magic. It's like, how do you define someone that has charisma? It's hard to define some of those things. Sometimes
To a certain extent, it is like magic. It's either there or it's not. But another way is kind of just learning, just over time. You learn your group and you learn what they're good at, what they're bad at, what they need help with, what they could help you with.
Yeah. I don't know. Okay. Guy. Ooh, I of course, as always, I always lose track of the time. Always. So, before we go, let me do my little plug, and then I'm going to let RPG Gamer plug. I know I'm just kind of cutting it a little bit abruptly, but I really do have to go to work. So, down below, you'll find all the information you need. There is a online convention, Con+1. Please check that out. There's signups for games. It's happening in November, I believe November 3rd, or whatever. Is a convention. It's helps out a children's charity. There's also everything down. There's Fantasy Grounds College. Please check that out if you have any interest in Fantasy Grounds. Yesterday, did a 2-hour vlogcast with Fat Ninja DM, who's part of the Fantasy Grounds College, and that Fantasy Grounds still is a viable online tool. It has a very steep learning curve, and Fantasy Grounds College is there to help you learn how to use it as a tool. They have new pricing structures if you haven't seen those pricing structures in a long time. So, check that out. Check out the panel that we did as well. We go through a live creation. There's also every detail below that. If you guys, of course, don't know, if you're brand new to what I'm doing, I am a contributing writer to Critical Hit Publishing. So yes, I do produce materials. They're down. You can find all that stuff down in the doobly-doo with the drive-through RPG. There's links to RP Gamers, links to Darius Jonah. Vincent's going to be on there pretty soon because I'm going to make him. A bunch of people, so we're all a big giant creators collective, big giant conclave of individuals. So if Jared says good chats, man. Thanks, JP. And as always, all you guys out there, like if you have any, if you are creative at all, please join in the chat. Become involved. And lastly, before RP takes us out, please, the successfully kickstarted book that he's helped write with Lath and Jaren. You got to check it out. Legat's Tome of Amazing Beasts. This is going to be a series that's going to continue on. The Kickstarter was successfully funded, and I'm going to now put RP Gamer on the spot to take us out. So let me shut up here because now you have the table.
Thank you. Well, I'm RP Gamer, and as DBJ has just said, I'm 1/3 of Power Up Gamers, and we've just finished the Kickstarter for Volume 2 of Tomb of Amazing Creatures, and as DBJ is showing, we've got Legat's Tomb of Amazing Creatures Volume 1 on print on demand currently. So if you want to go and buy that, you can. And DBJ mentioned Con+1, which we're actually in the middle of talking between ourselves at Power Up Gamers about how to get involved ourselves. We've got a few ideas which will come up. We've also got a few ideas related to our channels and more books coming your way when we get around to releasing them.
Yep. So guys, thanks for joining in. You know us. We're just basically hanging around a digital role-playing game table. If I could give you guys a digital slice of pizza, I would. We just like to sit back, talk. Those who spark some creativity in your own games. Maybe you want to write a book. You want to write a role-playing supplement. You want to start your own YouTube channel. You want to do all these kind of things. Hey, the pets are involved too. They're always great to be part of our role-playing experience, as you guys know. So thanks for joining me. Thanks for joining all of us. I'm here to just give some sparks of ideas. To me, it's like my morning cup of coffee, whatever. Everyone, thank you very much. Go down into the details below. Join the Discord. Keep the conversation going if you prefer. Match up with people who have different similar interests as you. And as always, let's just all be positive, be creative, be supportive of each other, and have a very good day. I will see you tomorrow. All right. In